Merry Christmas and welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum for our festive holiday episode. Ben made me wear this sweater. He said I had to wear something green, and this is the only green thing I have apart from the famous Bob Ross t-shirt that I wore last time. Today we're talking about what happens when a very generous uncle or parent or friend or yourself on eBay late night buys a drum and it shows up and you're very thankful. And then you open the box and are surprised. This is the gift-giving season. I've definitely gotten drums as gifts before, and I've also gotten, gifts of drum for myself in the holiday season a few times, and they usually come from the internet or from Craigslist. And we just wanted to talk about a little bit like what to do when you get that awesome gift that you're really thankful for, but it needs some help. So we spent a little time today kind of preparing a snare drum that you all will be familiar with because it's in most of the videos, both to show like how to take a drum that is fundamentally nice but needs some love.
It's not bad at all, really. Maybe it just needs a little love.
And also just to prove that you can make a superphonic sound bad. So, it's a superphonic. I don't have one, and now I do, and I'm super excited about it. However, this poor guy has seen some better days in its life. The batter head is hurting a little bit. There's some duct tape, some gaff tape on there. It's definitely been beaten up. Has some writing on it. And if we turn it over, the snare side has no logo on it, which is dubious to start with. It's got some pretty big dings in it. It is also stretched to the point where it's flush with the bearing edge. So you know it's been tuned up super tight. And lastly, the snare wires are wrecked. They actually look like they could almost be okay except for that one bent one on there. But if you take the tension off, you can see we worked them over pretty good. There's actually not a lot of money we need to spend to make this drum happy again, but the difference in sound, you can't put a price on. All right, so let's see where we're at. I wouldn't say I deliberately tried to tune this drum bad, but in sort of setting up this scenario of the pawn shop find or the thrift store find, that kind of thing, this, for me at least, is how they often show up sounding, which is that somebody played the heck out of it, loved it to death, and just didn't spend a lot of time maintaining it. So let's see what happens. If you were shopping for a drum and you heard it in person and it sounded like this, you'd say to yourself, that's not great. Either there's something wrong with the drum or there's something wrong with something on the drum. And then, you put it back on the shelf and you don't buy it. And this, is sort of a culmination. This is the end of the first, calendar year that we've been doing this show, and we've touched on a lot of different subjects. And right now we're going to utilize a whole slew of them to figure out what's going on here. And it really boils down to replacing the things that are damaged and understanding that they're damaged. Just because there isn't a hole in this head or just because it doesn't, look like the surface of the moon, that doesn't actually mean that it's okay. It has been played a lot. You can tell from how dirty it is, but also from how wobbly the overtones are. You could tune it to a pitch, but you're also running into a situation where the pressure of all the strikes in the center of the head has actually stretched the head into sort of like, concave in the circle. And that means that unless it's pitched extremely high, you're actually running into like almost like a phasing problem when you play it because the edge isn't moving at the same speed as the center. And a new head, you're going to have a more even tension from the center to the edge, which is going to result in a good feel and a consistency overall for the whole drum. The next thing I notice with the sound of this is that there is no crispiness in the snare wires, really. They're kind of boxy sounding, kind of tubby sounding. And that's both because the wires are bent and uneven and twisted, and also because the snare side head is totally stretched out. It's also got some dents in it that may or may not look like my knuckles from earlier when we were setting this up. And those are the sorts of things that happen from people setting it on a snare stand and having the claws of the stand just hit the bottom head. You get those sort of like knuckle looking things that you may not actually be able to see when it's under high tension, but you take it off and it does look sort of cratery and messed up. So all of those things together make a dull sounding drum with no articulation that's very difficult to tune to a pitch, and that in general is never going to sound the way that you want that drum to sound in terms of just clarity and sweetness and dynamics and all that stuff. It's worth noting too that when the wires are wrecked like this, and also when the bottom head is stretched to its absolute maximum, you will run into a drum, kind of like we talked about in the wide wires portion of the previous video, where it sounds choked and it also sounds wet at the same time. That's a hallmark of damaged wires, where some of them are not laying flat and some of them are bent. Maybe the wires are actually twisted in the strings, or if you're using straps, one of the straps is crooked, like in the butt plate or in the mechanism. Watch out for all that stuff. So we're going to go ahead and junk all this stuff and put brand new gear on here and just kind of see how much of an improvement we can make super quick just with heads and wires right now. And for future comparison later in the video, here's just some simple hits across the course of the head. All right, so step one, we changed out the wires. I actually didn't even change the strings that were holding them on. I mean, I would if I had extras around, but let's say you're just in a hurry and you have some wires, just the wires, no tuning change, nothing different. Better, not spectacular. Step two, change the snare side head. Got the snare side off, and as you can see, there is a lot more damage here than you can see when it's under tension. It's sort of scooped out in the middle. There's all these dents that I totally didn't do on purpose earlier. And you can also see the marks of the wires, the previous wires. And that is all going to contribute to a lousy sound, lousy response, and no crispiness in the wires at all. So now this is fresh snare side and fresh wires. So we're doing a little bit better now. It's still a little bit punchy, a little choked in the middle and stuff. And it's important to note, I haven't touched the batter head at all through any of this. I did the ruler thing on the bottom head to make sure it's level, and I pitched it up a bit to kind of where I would normally have it. So now the last thing is, if you don't have a batter head handy, we could pull the tape off and tune this one up and be okay. Like right now it's low, it's uneven, it's got tape on one side, which means that the weight of the skin is uneven and it just makes for all kinds of screwed up overtones and pitchy stuff. But we're gonna go ahead and just change the batter head out again as the last step. All right, batter's head is changed and our holiday snare fixer-upper is complete. The heads you use, again, are all up to you. The wires you use are up to you. This is just about understanding that these are 3 steps that get you to the thing sounding good. If one of the 3 is messed up and the others are fine, just change the one. But if it comes in and you're like, man, this whole thing is shredded, then just do one at a time. Start with the wires, because it's really hard sometimes to see that wires are damaged. I mean, those were super blown out. But start with the wires, then do the snare side, and do the batter last, unless the batter is obviously trashed. With regards to the snare wires also, if there's just one wire that's bent or crooked or something like that, I really don't recommend trimming them off, because it makes the set uneven tension-wise and can also create a little hook that's going to cut a hole in your head when you bring them up and back down again, and then that'll just tear as soon as you start playing. So if you get a new drum for the holidays, or if you buy one for yourself, Don't be afraid to take it apart, learn everything about it, and make sure that all of the constituent parts are functioning. Even something as simple as a bent, tuning lug can throw off your sense of if the drum's in tune or not. We didn't go so far as to include warped hoops into this experiment, but that's also a thing that can happen, especially with vintage drums that have die cast on them. If you have a triple flange that's a little crooked, it'll even out for the most part, but the older like Gretsch die cast are super stiff. So that's also something to look out for. And thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and enjoy your holidays, and hope you get a new drum for Christmas.